My friends, pay attention to the geopolitical chessboard I'm about to lay out. What I'm going to show you today is the technical, documented, and irrefutable proof that in the relentless war of the 21st century, having the largest army in the world, the biggest steel reserves, and the greatest number of soldiers in the ranks, it means absolutely nothing if you lose your intelligence. If you lose your silicon neurons, and the plain hard fact that the mainstream media still hasn't managed to process is this: Vladimir Putin's Russia is suffering a technological stroke, a military stroke in real time. And the consequences of this invisible collapse will shift the axis of global power later this year. No one is speaking honestly, but what just happened behind the scenes of the war in Europe was not just another ordinary bombing in a frozen trench. A few days ago, a surgical and lethal operation orchestrated by swarms of Ukrainian drones and missiles pierced the impenetrable Russian defense belt and struck the colossal Vensna industrial plant head-on. This facility, strategically located in the south-central part of Russia, just north of the Caucasus Mountains, is not just a simple gunpowder depot. That was not a factory for bullets or uniforms. Vensna is the sacred sanctuary where the neurons of the Russian war machine are forged. And for you to understand the tactical gravity of the situation, since 1959, Vensna has been one of the very few complexes where Russian semiconductors are literally cut from the so-called silicon wafers, exhaustively tested, packaged, and prepared to be the brains of Moscow's weapons. Without these small and invisible intelligence components, a state-of-the-art stealth fighter, a modern battle tank, or a hypersonic cruise missile that costs millions of dollars instantly turns into extremely expensive and useless pieces of flying scrap. And all that Western military intelligence knows today is that missiles do not forgive miscalculations. Fires in these facilities are irreparable catastrophes because semiconductor manufacturing requires extreme and flawless clean room conditions at every stage of production. Any invisible particle of smoke, soot in the air, or drastic change in temperature irreparably destroys entire batches of microchips. And without this main factory operating, Russia has just suffered a gigantic silicon lobotomy. You take away the intelligence from the giant and what's left is just brute force, blind shooting in the dark, and the situation is worse than it seems. Besides Vensna, the Russians currently have only one more centralized location capable of producing these military brains, located in the Zelenograd complex, just northwest of the capital Moscow. There are 3 smaller facilities, and the great lethal irony is that Zelenograd has a much more vulnerable and fragile anti-aircraft defense network than Vensna, which was already heavily protected. It's only a matter of time and ballistics before Ukrainian intelligence launches its next waves of drones and turns off the last light in Russia's technological operating room, blinding the giant once and for all. But before we dive deep into this systemic failure that proves Russia has already lost the war, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like on the video because it takes a lot of work to bring this to you, my friends. Because to understand why everything went wrong for Putin now, we need to finally destroy the illusion of power that Moscow's propaganda machine has always tried to sell to the world. And by the way, it's one of the most efficient propaganda machines on planet Earth. The system tried to convince us that Russia was a high-tech military superpower, even here in Brazil, with certain influencers, commanders, and military personnel who think Russia is everything. And to them, the United States is absolutely nothing, but the reality is humiliating. What makes a chip so vital in a war? Well, think of the chip as the brain of the weapon. The more modern the technology, the smaller and more packed the neurons inside this brain become, measured in nanometers. To give you a real sense of this technological gap, while the cell phone in your hand right now runs on ultra-modern processors. From 3 to 5 nanometers, the entire Russian war machine is stuck in the prehistoric era of 90 to 350 nanometers. The bigger it is, the less technological and sophisticated. The smaller it is, the more processing power and capability. It's like putting the brain of a pocket calculator from the 80s up against cutting-edge artificial intelligence. The maximum capacity of the Russian industry can only manufacture gigantic, heavy, and ultra-heavy chips. Just so you can clearly understand the size of the gap, trying to guide a modern hypersonic missile using a chip made in Russia. Today, it's exactly the same as trying to use the brain of an Atari video game from the 80s to pilot a state-of-the-art fighter jet. It's a prehistoric, slow, and dumb technology, and this is very serious. Even to manufacture this dumb chip, Russia needed smuggled machinery from Europe. And that's why the blackout at the Vensna factory is lethal. Without it, Russia can't even produce the Atari's brain anymore. Most of Putin's strategy is based on keeping his fighter jets more than 30 kilometers away from the front line, dropping glide bombs to attack Kiev's power grids from a distance. But how do you guide a flying bomb if it doesn't have a brain to know where to hit? The level of logistical desperation in Moscow has reached darkly comic proportions. Western military intelligence has documented that high-ranking Russian engineers are being forced by the Kremlin to loot refrigerator stocks, electric massagers, and to rip the control boards out of imported washing machines. All of this is to steal the chips from household appliances and forcibly shove them into the panels of missiles and armored vehicles. But here lies the ruthless bottleneck of physics. The chip in your washing machine was made to agitate soapy water, not to survive extreme G-forces. It melts, shorts out, or cracks under the hellish heat of a missile engine in midair. And when you put a household microchip inside a weapon of war, what you get is not a smart bomb. You get what we call a tin brain. The bomb goes blind. The missile misses the target. It falls on its own territory or is easily shot down. The silicon lobotomy is destroying Russian accuracy in real time. And it's at this bloody point in the chess game that Russian existential desperation crosses paths with the brutal cold calculation of Beijing's machinery. Think about it with me. If Putin's Russia can no longer manufacture the brains of its own weapons, and if washing machine boards are useless for war, what's left for the once proud Soviet bear? Beg on its knees for external help. And there is only one global supplier willing to sell its technological soul to save Moscow from collapse: Communist China. But look at the level of tactical ignorance of those who think there is a loyal friendship between Moscow and Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't lift a finger to help Russia out of solidarity, and they don't do charity. China is not Putin's benevolent savior. It is taking advantage of this silicon lobotomy to turn immense Russia into a submissive technological vassal locked in a financial cage. Do you remember our in-depth analysis of Chinese Tianxia diplomacy that we talked about in yesterday's video? I'll link it here in the card if you haven't checked it out yet. Which means everything under the sky. China's leadership sees Russia today not as a sovereign ally, but purely as a gigantic, desperate satellite state. Is the trap set by Xi Jinping cruel? China may even authorize the sale of military chips to Russia, but there is a lethal incompatibility problem. The framework of Russian weapons and jets was never designed to accept the language and architecture of Chinese chips. It's like taking the electronic system of a modern Formula One car and trying to force it into an old Soviet tractor with a hammer. It doesn't fit, does it? Do the systems short circuit? And even in the face of this humiliation, Russia has no options. Technical and financial dependence quickly turns into total submission. The Chinese mycelium demands payment for this help with extremely high interest rates, Russian oil at rock-bottom prices, land concessions on the Asian border, and blind obedience. The powerful Russian giant has become a hostage of the Chinese Communist Party because of the lack of computer processors. And if you think this maneuver was done only with Russia, it wasn't. China does this with Europe today and is also trying to bend the United States to its will. But Trump was smarter. He went after rare earths, which are the main element for manufacturing these chips, and is removing the United States from dependence on China. But you can believe it. Today, for the American war machine to manufacture an F-35 fighter jet or a satellite in the sky, they need rare minerals and Chinese processing. But going back to Putin, Russia's war manufacturing machine has stalled. And today they are facing the greatest documented qualitative collapse of an armed force in modern history. And it is exactly here, with Russia in technological shambles and Ukraine holding out, that the brightest and most dangerous factor in the global chessboard comes into play. The hidden agent enters the scene. Yes, my friends, the gift I want to give you is an analysis of mine from Shimon Oliveira, and we are going to analyze together if this makes sense. But if you ask any shallow analyst from the mainstream media what Donald Trump did with Vladimir Putin, they will tell you that Trump gave in, that he is soft on Russia, or that he shook hands with Putin in front of the cameras with pats on the back. My friends, pay attention. This is the biggest diplomatic smokescreen ever created in history. What Donald Trump carried out behind the scenes was not a surrender. It was the most lethal, complex, and covert global leverage operation orchestrated in this century. Pay attention here. Trump brought Russia completely to its knees without having to authorize a single shot from an American rifle. And how, you ask me? Look at the sophistication of the American lion's invisible engineering. The central strategy of Putin and the Ayatollahs in Iran was simple and diabolical: to drag the United States into a bloody and costly quagmire in the Middle East, forcing Washington to spend trillions and forget about the defense of Ukraine. And for a few months that was true. And how did Russia manage to force this? By sponsoring, arming, and sending the technology of the feared Iranian Shahed kamikaze drones. The goal was not only to strike targets in Kiev, but also to arm Iran's terrorists to physically threaten the billion-dollar oil wells of the Arab Gulf countries, Israel, and American naval routes. It was the masterstroke to divide the West. Obviously, Russia is not alone in this plan. China also liked the idea. But Donald Trump seized on that exact thread running through the crisis and flipped the bomb's polarity in a terrifying way. What the hidden agent did behind the scenes was to set off red alarms in Riyadh, in Abu Dhabi, and in the major European capitals, pointing the finger at the real source of the threat. The alliance between Moscow and Tehran, the geopolitical math was turned upside down. The Arab princes sitting on trillions of petrodollars and furious to see that Russian-backed drones were threatening their black gold got the message. The best defense against Iranian drones is not to wait for them to fall in Dubai. The best defense is to heavily fund the military strangulation of Iran's patron, Russia itself. Trump's silent war turned the Russian trap into the biggest financial leverage to save Ukraine. Literally, the Russian spell violently turned against the sorcerer of Moscow. The trillionaire Arab world and European governments began injecting billions of dollars non-stop directly into the backbone of Kiev's industrial and cyber defense. The effect on the battlefield is devastating. Today, Ukraine produces military drones and autonomous ships with cutting-edge technology in greater numbers, and at a speed that lobotomized Russia, dependent on washing machine microchips, can no longer even keep up with. Ukraine now wields the silicon sword while the Russian Goliath swings blindly in the dark, blasting away with its tin can brain. Yes, my friends, without firing a single shot, Trump flipped the board. What we are coldly dissecting here is the grave of an era. That heavy and exhausting war of attrition in the muddy trenches of recent years, where Russian commanders just pushed thousands of soldiers to gain ground at the cost of lives, firing tons of unguided rounds, is dead. And just a curiosity for you who stayed with me until now. Did you know that a Russian soldier has only 35 minutes of life expectancy on the front line of this war? Guys, is it a real-time meat grinder? The slow war is over. What comes next is dynamic, hyper-technological, and unpredictable. The pendulum of power no longer favors the irrational quantity of armored vehicles and now exclusively favors silicon intelligence. On the map, Russia is still the largest nation on Earth. It has an endless graveyard of old Soviet tanks. It outnumbers the Ukrainian people and has a vast advantage in artillery pieces. But a mountain of dirty steel can't beat precision intelligence science that sees in the dark. If Putin's machine can't urgently regenerate its electronic neurons, they're marching straight into an abyss of unprecedented military demoralization. Now, putting emotional bias aside, there are only two real survival options left for the wounded bear today. Either Putin swallows his own nationalist pride and signs an ideological surrender, embracing the total humiliation of kneeling down and becoming a puppet state financially controlled by Beijing. Or the scenario that truly keeps the Pentagon up at night materializes. The old blind bear, cornered by the Arabs and bleeding, will be forced to unlock the dusty old locks of the only weapons in its arsenal, the doomsday ones, which, in fact, do not depend on the genius of modern microchips to wipe a city off the map. The tactical nuclear forces. Yes, and they are on the table. And at the threshold of this desperate Russian roulette, the game plunges into complete darkness. As a practical and surgical exercise in analysis for the sharp minds of this channel, I want you to go down right now to the comments section and publicly share your raw perspective on this chessboard. Look, my friends, I challenge you to write in big capital letters the two key words of this briefing: spell against the sorcerer or the tin brain. Yes, spell against the sorcerer or the tin brain. I want to see who has the intellectual courage to understand that brute force has turned to dust in the age of light and silicon. And the disturbing question I leave burning in your mind is, what exactly is the lobotomized, furious, and suddenly blind empire capable of doing when it realizes that its so-called invincible technology has become a joke and scrap metal exposed to the whole world? The summer in Eastern Europe will be a summer of blazing fire, shrapnel, and global upheaval. My friends, the ultimate lesson from this downfall of Russia and this geopolitical spell is unforgiving. Anything that loses its edge and becomes obsolete, history does not forgive, and the market devours without mercy. In your day-to-day professional life, the logic is exactly the same. The war you fight today is not just for the best technical product, it's for the most valuable and scarce currency in the world: people's attention. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to try to get the public to absorb deep and serious content on social media? The false impression is that only superficial memes go viral: the dance, the joke, the little jump. I used to think exactly like that, and I know how frustrating it is. But 15 years ago, sweating blood in the trenches of radio and television, I understood a golden rule: unquestionable authority requires a fusion of in-depth content with a solid strategy. Thousands of experts want recognition but don't understand that gravity has changed. The game today is 100% media. Look at Simed. To triple its sales dramatically, the company realized it needed to operate like a mass media machine. The reality is raw and unfiltered, my friends. Your identity can never be outsourced. The business owner needs to put himself out there on the front lines and set the vision. Look at the old man from Havan. Yes, he showed up, made himself known, and kept growing every day. He keeps opening stores all over Brazil. Has the easy era of recording however you want on your phone without any authority and still making money come to an end? Is this space bleeding and now demands elite professionalism? Pay attention. The algorithm is not your enemy. It's just a cold mathematical tool. The goal isn't to become a shallow influencer, but to forge your own ecosystem of magnetic communication, making the machine work for you. And with all this, I validated this method by generating over 50 million monthly views here on social media, all monetized in dollars. The real proof is that whoever masters retention masters the market. The product you need isn't a course, it's your definitive transformation into a formidable authority. To forge this in practice, I created an exclusive immersion on July 12th, 100% in person, face-to-face with me in my studio and with my professional team. I will personally guide you in this process. I'm cold when it comes to numbers. There are only 10 seats. When the 10th is taken, the steel door will close. Well, the QR code is on the screen now. Use it to access our page. The link is in the first pinned comment and in the video description. Or type "I want" in the comments now and I'll send you the link. Secure your spot and bulletproof your communication. And for those of you who demand quality, even when it's time to clear your mind on the weekends, stop wasting valuable time scrolling through streaming catalogs. Instead of searching for productions infected by ideological agendas, visit our exclusive channel now for tips on series and movies. Yes, my friends, high-intelligence cinema, intense stories without any whining, with zero woke culture shoved down your throat. We've already done this for you. We've created a selection of the best series and the best movies there. Just sit down, enjoy with your family, and have fun. Relax, because it's good to unwind every now and then. So, the link is in the description, in the pinned comment, and in the card that's going to appear on your screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like. Why? Because it takes a lot of work to make this. Now shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.